We are on to this very interesting leadership keynote, preparing for the next technology wave. And this particular session is brought to you by Ernst & Young LLP. Our keynote speaker is Mr. Mahesh Makhija, leader, Digital and Emerging Technology, Ernst & Young India. Before I invite him onto the stage, I will take this privilege of speaking a few words of introduction. At EY, Mr. Mahesh works with clients to help them leverage digital paradigms to change their business models, reimagine customer experience, harness the power of analytics to optimize business processes, leverage emerging technologies including IoT, AI, ML, and big data to enable digital transformation. Mr. Mahesh consulted with large organizations both in India and globally on their digital journeys. He has a keen understanding of the change management issues that need to be addressed to enable large companies to make the transformation from doing digital projects to being digital. A huge round of applause for Mr. Mahesh Makhija as he comes on to speak on the leadership keynote, preparing for the next technology wave. A very warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and great to be here. It's been almost 20 years since I was back in Calcutta speaking to an event like this, so really great to be here. It's like the second day of a 3-day session on digital, so you've probably been drinking the digital Kool-Aid for 2 days now, right? Everyone's told you about this land of milk and honey where bots will do all the work, a drone will deliver a pizza to your home, right? An IoT sensor will figure out whether you have milk and eggs in your fridge. So that's about where we are at right now, and I wanted to temper this enthusiasm and give you some experiences from the field, right? So the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about some case studies which we've been looking at, right? Digital transformation is not easy. There are lessons to be learned. There are things which clients have done successfully, and there are many programs which also have not done well. So I want to talk a little bit about what we've learned from our experiences, right? So it's, in many ways, it's kind of an interesting time we're living in right now, right? On the one hand, there's this huge number of technologies which are all hitting their inflection points almost at the same time, right? You have, I'm just talking about mobile, social, analytics, cloud, and big data, but a whole bunch of technologies, including genomics, 3D printing, all of these hitting enterprise scale at the same time, right? And then also, these technologies all work with each other. So I meet clients who say, I have an IoT strategy, or I have an AI strategy, or a data strategy, but we believe that's not the way to look at it, because the data you get from your IoT sensors is what's feeding your AI/ML algorithms. That same information can then be used to action, which means your robotics platform needs to work on that. So all of this is working together. That's the second important point. And then the third reason why I think this time is different and this time is exciting is because of funding. Just the SoftBank Vision Fund will invest almost $100 billion in these kinds of technologies over the next 2 years. Right? So a lot of enthusiasm. At the same time, like I said, we need to temper that with the real practical life lessons of what needs to happen in a digital transformation program. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go along. What I'll do is I've picked 3 examples of case studies. Right? The first is in the area of financial services. For those of you who work with banks, that industry is significantly under pressure from the threat of challenger banks, fintechs, etc. So I want to give you a sense of what's happening in that space. What are these challengers doing? How are they working? And what is the response of banks? So that's one example. The second example is a Chinese example. This is Alibaba. And many of you probably heard of Alibaba. And China is probably one place where all of this innovation is happening at scale, right? All the labs in Silicon Valley, all the way from in India and Bangalore and many in Calcutta, all of the innovation is getting applied at scale in Calcutta, in China. And in many ways, China provides us the glimpse of what can happen in India if you fast forward it a few years, right? So we'll dig into the retail example of Alibaba. How are they thinking about their ecosystem? What exactly are they doing with their customers? So we'll talk about that. And then the third example, there's some people from the government of West Bengal here as well. So we'll talk about a project which we have on as we speak in the government of Andhra Pradesh, which is citizen services. How can you reimagine how citizens interact with governments? and what are the kind of challenges which are faced over there. Yeah? So that's the first part of the conversation, just giving you the here and now. This is not about 2050, it's not projecting out 30, 40 years. This is happening as we speak. This is how our clients are reimagining their businesses, they're thinking about customer experience, they're thinking about operations. So that's what we'll talk about in the first part of it. The second part of the conversation is about what are the underlying themes. We just spend some time digging into and abstracting out what the themes are. And then the final part is about what one should do, right? So those are the three parts to this conversation. So we'll start with a video of how financial services is already beginning to work. So take a look at this, and then we can talk about it.
My Financial Storyline is an app that helps users see their financial transactions using the same rich, intuitive timeline view used by many social networks, both for past transactions and those that will happen in the future. The app also lets users set financial goals and share those goals with others. Mark is a recently employed graduate. He lives with his parents, but he wants to move in with his girlfriend. Using a biometric login, Mark accesses the My Financial Storyline app and adds his goal, to buy a house in the next 5 years. Mark can see all his previous transactions, plus upcoming ones, such as his salary being paid and some regular insurance payments he makes. He accepts a prompt to reschedule these so that they are all leaving the account on the same day. Using a biometric login again, Mark adds a neglected savings account, giving him a full overview of his savings across multiple accounts. He then uses the app to invite his girlfriend Kelly to collaborate on their shared savings goal for the house deposit. Later that day, Mark receives an app alert, telling him that Kelly has made her first contribution towards their shared goal.
So that kind of gives you a feel for how banking could work. Now compare this with your existing bank application, right? Pretty clunky, not easy to navigate. This had a rich user interface, giving proper alerts, helping you do financial planning, collaboration with your family members. But that's not the entire story. What's happening behind this is one of the most important revolutions happening in financial services, which is called open banking, right? So what's really happening there is in Europe, for example, banks have been forced to open up their data and also all of the infrastructure which they have available to other challenger banks and fintech companies, right? So right now, as we speak, there's 25 challenger banks in Europe which are taking on the existing legacy banks. What they do is they work with the banks in the back end, but they're focusing on the customer problem. They're making the customer experience much better. They're providing personalized service, rich interaction of the kind which you saw. And there's another country, actually, in the world which is moving along the path to open banking very fast. It's a country where payments innovation is off the charts. Any guesses? Which is the #1 country for payments innovation today in the world? Israel, Estonia. Well, it's actually India, right? There is no other country in the world where you actually have something like what we have in the UPI interface today, right? It gives you a virtual private address. You can move money between two accounts. You can actually have a pull mechanism. It abstracts out account information. And most importantly, the UPI mechanism today in India provides the same infrastructure on which fintechs can innovate, right? So all of the fintechs which you see, Google Pays or PhonePe, etc., are all working off of APIs provided by a large part of it by the government, but working with banks. You can have a bank account today with ICICI Bank, and you can be using a fintech company to actually move money from that account to somebody else, right? So India actually, in our research, is one of the most aggressive countries when it comes to actually financial innovation today, which is quite interesting. The reason that's happened is two big reasons. One is because of the billion people we have now in the Aadhaar ecosystem, right? It's the largest digital identity artifact asset today in the world. And that enables a tremendous amount of innovation with customer onboarding, et cetera, despite some of the hiccups we've had with the Supreme Court judgment. So we have that. And then we have NPCI, which has been releasing a significant number of APIs around payments. So this whole area of financial services is getting transformed as we speak. And this is so we looked at, we just took an existing bank website And then we looked at all the different fintech companies which are encroaching on that space. Right? It's one of the most vibrant ecosystems in the world. You go to your bank to look at your account information. There's a fintech, which can give you that kind of a feel. Like Walnut, for example, can do that. You want to shop for information for a bank loan or for an insurance policy. We have Bank Bazaar, you have Policy Bazaar. Payments is totally now disintermediated. You don't need to go to your bank account to make a payment. You can use Paytm, you can use a bunch of other apps, right? All the way to investment management. There are there are amazing companies coming up. Now, not all of them, of course, will be successful, but banks are starting to adopt the same paradigms. So ultimately, the customer wins because the interface is much smoother, it's a much richer interface, and you have, like I mentioned, all of these different data sources coming online with APIs. So financial services across the globe and in India, right? It's under the threat of these different fintech companies, and essentially, this is the threat of digital to legacy companies. It's an opportunity for fintech companies, but it's a threat to existing banks. What they can do is they will be commoditized, right? Essentially, they'll provide some of the infrastructure, but they lose the customer engagement. So that's what they have to respond to. Let's go to our next example. This is retail, and this is retail in China. Take a look at what's happening in China in the retail area.
Shopping usually involves one of two options: go to the store or buy it online. These days, more and more people are opting for the box on their doorstep, which is putting a squeeze on traditional brick-and-mortar retail. But when online shopping can't quite deliver, you need to go to the store. The experience can be frustrating and disappointing. Online or offline, these cannot be the only options. Well, in China, a new form of retail is taking shape that's combining the best of both online and offline retail. Alibaba, the company best known for its online marketplace, is leading the way. For them, the future isn't total domination of e-commerce. Rather, it's the complete digitization of all commerce that could be the key to saving traditional retail. The company simply refers to this as new retail. It's already helping even the most traditional retail models adapt to a new digital world in unexpected, creative ways. Why not start with the supermarket? Let's face it, no one really enjoys the process of grocery shopping. But ordering online isn't perfect either. Some things you want to pick yourself, and life can't always accommodate a delivery window. Enter Hema, Alibaba's designed-from-scratch grocery store for modern times, customized the way consumers want to shop for food. The shopping experience is powered by your mobile phone. Scan and find out what you're buying. You can buy groceries, or eat in with the freshest seafood that's instantly prepared for you. And best of all, you can have your groceries and cooked seafood all delivered to you in as quickly as 30 minutes, if you're lucky enough to live within a 3-kilometer radius of Hema. That's because every Hema store doubles as a distribution center. The model is so popular in China that people are actually moving to live near Hema locations. The key to saving traditional retail is to forget about tradition altogether.
So that's a retail example in China. What you saw looks pretty straightforward, right? It's merging online and offline, responding to a client when he comes to a store, and then following him when he goes online or in the mobile app. But actually, there's a lot of stuff happening again in the back end over here, which is where the real work in digital comes in. The first is really building that single view of your customer, right? Retailers don't know who their customers are. You can walk into a big bazaar today, you can walk out and they'll never know who you are. So how do you onboard the customer? How do you recognize the customer? And then how do you respond to that customer? How do you do that in real time, right? How do you make sure that your supply chain is flexible enough to move? For example, this example you saw, you're going to be shopping at the Hema store, using a phone, for example, to navigate the store. But before you reach home, your groceries have already reached home before you. So the store is now becoming a center for a supply chain as well, not just a distribution center. So like we discussed, and this is again, Alibaba is coming to India. They are already here in many ways. Amazon is here. There's many companies who are looking at these experiences, and very soon you'll see that retail in India is starting to get transformed with essentially the same kinds of paradigms. Last example, it's about governance, right? How does the government interact with citizens, and how can digital become a force for good in the entire citizen experience? So take a look at this. This is Andhra Pradesh, where EY is helping the government actually stitch together all of their different departments. Almost 750 different citizen services are coming together on one platform.
My AP portal. Even though some of the citizen services are computerized and online today, these are scattered across different department portals and software applications. There is no single source to access all services from one portal. My AP Citizen Services portal is a single access point bringing all digitally transformed services. With digital transformation, you can avoid visiting government offices and achieve instant service delivery while not having to fill lengthy forms. Imagine with just a single sign-on, which is either Aadhaar or eKYC driven, citizens can access G2C, G2B services, and government employees can access G2G services. It's now a simple three-step journey from finding a service to completing the transaction. The service delivery time is magically reduced from days to minutes and seconds. My AP portal will help achieve higher citizen happiness index through visible governance, invisible government.
So what's happening here is you're moving away from departmental silos, moving towards a citizen-centric kind of an experience, making sure that there is integration between each of the departments in the government, right? And also leveraging new technologies. So this again becomes a case where digital is not just in the private sector, but in the public sector also becoming a force for good. So what are the themes then? So the first thing we're seeing is there's convergence of industries, right? Telcos becoming banks, retailers wanting to become banks, companies like Google and the big tech companies getting into payments. So all of this is all colliding with each other, and this because of the second reason, which is it's all a battle for customer engagement. Everyone's after the customer to give them better experiences, make sure that they know the customer better, and use that information to improve the customer experience. And then, last but not least, automation and datafication, right? Every single thing over here which you just saw, the back end of it is working for automation, and then data becomes the fuel that churns through the entire system. And you're using data at every single point in time to better the actual experience. Take a look at this. Tell me what you think this is. Any guesses? Sorry? Anyone knows what this is? Kindle library? Smartphones? So this is what is called a click farm, right? This is where people are generating clicks which are fake. And it's currently estimated that almost 30% of user reviews, clicks, likes, user-generated content are all fake. And it's estimated that just the consumer products industry loses around $8 billion a year because they're wasting their time looking at this kind of stuff, which is generated by these click farms all across the world, right? So this is kind of the flip side of digital, right? On one side, you have easy access, open architectures, but then you also have people who are indulging in fraud, right? Every single point in a company becomes a point which is actually a point where you're collecting data. And then that's also a point of vulnerability. You guys probably attended the earlier session on cyber, which to my mind is the single biggest threat which exists today in the world. So how do you tackle all this, right? There's a tremendous amount of opportunity, all of these great technologies, opportunities to reinvent your business. The flip side of it is that there is always the threat of cyber, threat of fraud. So how do you tackle all of this? So in the next section, we'll just talk a little bit about what we are seeing clients do, which we believe is successful, and then some of the areas where you need to be careful about how you're trading. So we ran a survey across our global client base, surveyed almost 2,000 customers, and we asked them about digital. What are you doing in digital? What areas are you spending money on? Well, the good news is that 90% of our customers, 90% of all of you folks in this room are starting to understand that digital is a boardroom topic. It's an area to invest in. So everyone's increasing their focus on it, making sure that they understand their business priorities and moving forward, right? So across all industries, the automotive industry, for example, is dealing with things like electrification of cars, Uber and ride-sharing platforms, peer-to-peer platforms. So there's a tremendous amount of churn happening in that industry. If we take something like healthcare, using genomics, using patient data, creating of a single electronic health record, you're using that information to better patient care, right? So you have sensors measuring exactly what your heart rate is, the acidity level in your stomach, and that can get better healthcare outcomes for many people, right? So lots of focus on digital. Almost every company realizes this is something which they need to pay attention to. But we believe that a majority of these programs will fail. And the reason we think they'll fail is that because two large reasons. One is, like I said earlier, they're not connecting the dots. They're doing digital, and they're digitizing yesterday's business. So you're looking at yesterday's consumers, yesterday's products, you're automating yesterday's processes, and that is something which is almost bound to accelerate the decline of your business, right? The second thing is scalability. How do you scale this? You've seen many labs, innovation labs, etc., but how do you take things from the lab and implement it? And many of our clients are coming to us today and saying that we need help to scale all of this digital innovation which is happening. So those are some of the areas where we're finding clients focus, and we distinguish between doing digital projects and actually thinking and becoming a digital company, right? When you're doing digital projects, you're putting the front end, you're taking an existing process and you're putting a web front end on it, for example. When you're actually thinking about becoming a digital company, you're doing three different things. You're reimagining your business model like we discussed, figuring out who are your new products, your new customers. The second thing you're doing is focusing on the customer experience and making sure that you have an innovation lab which is geared towards improving the customer experience. And the third thing is you're ripping out cost, right? Netflix competes in India, which almost nobody in India. Now think about that in the context of a company which has got content, maybe even a telco network. How do they compete with somebody like Netflix, which is already in India? Similarly, Google with their payment service, almost like very few employees, but they're riding off the back of pretty insignificant cost, but very large infrastructure, right? So that's what we see where success lies, making sure that you can integrate all of your different programs into a holistic program, and then running it like a portfolio, right? Digital needs to be something that is run like a portfolio of projects, almost like a VC investing in certain projects, some projects which are going to take off, some of them will not, and then figuring out which are more successful, testing, learning, and moving forward in that entire journey. So making sure that you kind of treat digital as a portfolio of programs is critical to success. And we believe there's 4 key capabilities as you set up your digital programs. There's the entire, what we call the bridge and the engine room. Think of it like a ship where you're looking forward, trying to reimagine what's going to come in the future, and make sure that you're paying attention to all of the different trends in the industry. That's what is the bridge. We have your entire innovation capability, which should become as central to a company like a finance function or an HR function. So innovation is the second big area where companies need to focus on. Once you do that, the design, test, and iteration, we believe that has to be done fast in an agile model, and finally moving into deployment when you start to scale the entire digital initiative. And finally, diversity, right? What happens when great minds don't think alike, right? And this is where you need to focus on what's the makeup of your company. You need gender diversity, diversity of sexual orientation, age, ethnic diversity. So it's only when you have that kind of a constituent company and those kinds of employees that you're going to be able to think outside the box and really innovate in digital. So that's what I had, and happy to take any questions. No questions? All simple stuff, right? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Mahesh Makhija. May I now request Mr. Chandan Majumdar to kindly come on the stage and present Mr. Mahesh Makhija with a memento. Here's Mr. Chandan Majumdar, Director Sales, ABP Private Limited, presenting a memento to Mr. Mahesh Makhija. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir.